Sendo Reliability webinar, and we're going to talk about professional development, which is kind of at the heart of what Sendo Reliability is all about, is sharing knowledge and giving you and all the folks that visit the site on a regular basis lots of options from lots of different voices. I think we've got close to 70 different contributors in one form or fashion or another. I'm redoing the menu tree for under courses because it was just getting way too long. I think we're close to, let's see, it's probably close to 15 courses offered there. And obviously not all by us at Ascendo, a few that we host, and plans to bring on some more courses here in short order. So this topic has been near and dear to my heart for a long time. And so I wanted to chat about it today. So welcome everybody. Hopefully the sound is working. I got Carl's here, Aji, Julian, John, Kirk. Let me get further down in the alphabet. Here's Tim and Patricia and a bunch of others. So welcome everybody for taking a little time today. Now, hopefully everything's going to be working as usual. If the screen goes dark or quiet, give me a couple minutes and I'll get back in as quick as I can. I still haven't solved the problem of what's crashing my machine here. Now, professional development is one of the things we hear a lot about. And if you have a certification from some professional society of some sort, or a license, say a professional engineer or a chartered engineer, you probably have a requirement to do professional development in some sort, to study stuff that's in your field or in your area of expertise, whatever, that kind of stuff. Or we may be facing a challenge at work or with a particular failure that's occurring, or why do we get so much downtime? We can face challenges day in and day out. There's all kinds of things that, we've not done before or we're not good at. And we can look at those as challenges also. And it's really about a frame of mind of what you take on and what you decide you're going to go learn. And professional development is this part of our professional lives. Yet it's pretty vague as to what does it really mean and how do we get the most out of that activity. And part of this process is, well, we need to identify what are those challenges and what are those gaps in our capability. What is it that we don't really know yet? The first time I was at work and my boss came in and said, hey, you need to come up with a test to estimate the life expectancy of this new product we've just created. And we've got some prototypes for you, but that's about it. You go figure it out. And it was basically, I was identified for me as you need to go figure out how to do accelerated life testing. Now, I didn't even know what that was. And my boss didn't use that term. So we went and sorted out what it is I was trying to do. And then we tried it and ended up with a pretty decent result, and one that the team and the customer enjoyed. And then over the years, I've worked on so many different accelerated tests that I feel pretty confident in my capability with that. Yet that first discussion in that afternoon, kind of going, what is it I'm trying to do? That was part of identifying that challenge. What is it that I need to go learn so that I could go accomplish this particular objective or goal? Now, to get really good at something, though, once you've faced a challenge and said, yeah, I want to do better with that, whether it's rock climbing or whatever, is go practice. Is try it, get some feedback, sort out what worked and what didn't work, and do you really want to go do this? If it is not useful, it's not valuable, it's not of interest, and so on, well, then don't apply and perfect your skills at it. It takes that motivation to learn. And I'm going to go back to that in some detail, is we're not in school anymore. We're not told there's a test at the end of the quarter and and we need to pass the test, and there's lots of pressure on us from our family and friends and peers and teachers and so on, that's what we got to do. We can choose to take courses. We can choose to read a book. We can choose to go to the gym and practice. Yet we need to make that choice. And every now and then I've run into courses I've taught as a consultant, and it became clear that part of the class was there because they were told to be there. They had no, they, I jokingly called them prisoners because they were required to be there and they didn't really know why they had to be there, what they were going to do with what they were going to learn, how would they ever apply it, what's in it for me. And it wasn't a really great situation for them to actually learn and go give it a try, see what works and doesn't work. On the other hand, I've had plenty of students that show up and go, they're just full of questions and they're full of and eager to apply it. And how do I use it here? And let me give it a shot. And oh, I got more questions for you. And they tend to do really well. But the difference, in my opinion, is they were motivated to try to solve a problem or to learn something. So it's there's a lot to professional development other than you get to go to a conference once a year if your organization offers that as part of your professional development. Um, Not that there's anything wrong with going to a conference. There's, I think I talked about that at one point in the webinar, or at least I know I've written about it, is there's good ways and bad ways to go to a conference, but we'll get into that another time. So let me ask, um, what what motivates you or prompts you to learn? And I'll take a sip of water here, and you can use the chat window is the one that I mostly monitor, but what is it that gets you to open the book or to do ask questions or go to the library or search for something online? What gets you going? Yeah, Michael, well said. Yeah, faced with something new. Yeah, I think in our profession, we see a new or novel failure mechanism. We see some weird symptoms of some sort. That's one of those that we all can probably relate to as well. How do we learn enough so that we can actually solve this thing? We have, root cause analysis and things like that to go deal with this. Professional death, Johanna, it's an interesting one. Yeah, it's there's stuff to learn just to stay relevant. Um, when I was in the Army, I was hanging out in a computer lab. It was pre 286 Microsoft or Intel machines. It was pretty early, and I got asked to teach the post generals, the guy that's running the whole operation, teach his secretary how to use a word processor. And she didn't want to learn a word processor one way or another. She said, I can type faster than it's necessary, and I don't need to learn something new. So that was a challenge. Never did actually get her in front of the word processor. Um, it was just a total lack of so on. But she was also very, very close to retiring and didn't really see the need. Whereas I think I agree with you, Johan, is that I don't know how many different things I've had to learn besides just computers, but new programs and new applications and using databases. And now we're all trying to figure out how and why we would want to use ChatGPT and other generative AI stuff to do things. And we're finding areas where it's helpful and others where it's like, well, that's silly, but we're all learning that kind of stuff and how to and where to use it. Yeah, no, it makes sense. If you're not keeping up, you'll be kind of left in the dust. There's no doubt for that. Concern for lifelong learning. Yeah, some people, I think, Carl, your comment is one that I resonate with. Is I just like learning new stuff. I kind of grew up under the motto of learn something every day. And, some days I go a little above and beyond that and dive into all kinds of different things and try to learn stuff. Um, yeah, there's all kinds of reasons to dive into just being motivated to learn. And sometimes it's just how do you get to work for your new position is what's the best route. That's learning in some form or fashion. Take some of the exact same skills as when we're trying to learn or relearn how to use calculus to solve a problem. So there's lots of ways we're motivated. One that I don't like all that much is I'm working in the office and I get a phone call on a Friday afternoon from an angry customer, or I get a phone call from the factory saying they're down. Um, and it's time to take action and go sort out what's going on, start the failure analysis process and quarantine products and all that other good stuff. We end up having to solve problems. I think that's the essence of what we do in the engineering fields is there's a problem. And part of that is either somebody hands us the problem or we recognize an issue or a problem that we should go solve. And then sometimes we just don't know enough to solve that problem. So we got to figure it out. What is it that we need to know? Similar to what I did when my boss handed me that accelerated life test is, well, what is that? Well, how do I do that? And luckily ran into a book titled Accelerated Testing and actually got a hold of the author and I'm still in colleague and talk to him on a regular basis in trade messages and so on. I'm still learning about how to do that. But it's all in the realm of we got a problem to solve in our professional lives. That's kind of part and parcel of what we're doing. That's how we add value to our organization is we go learn enough to solve the problem. The other part is that there's various, I don't know, milestones is probably the right term, but there's a in a product development or bringing up a new production line, there's milestones that we're going to be up to this point and we're going to have a beta program and get this out to some customers. And we've got dates for that, or we have a product launch, or we have a turnaround. We're going to retool the factory and take it down for 2 weeks. And then we have a deadline. At the end of 2 weeks, we need to be back up and running and qualified and ready to go. So there's plenty of ways that we do project management that hands us these kinds of things. But we also do it to ourselves. If you have a project or a product development plan, you may include, I want to take this and this class, or I want to get a degree, working part-time towards a graduate degree of some sort, or take a series of courses on Coursera or some other online system and get the certifications for it, or hit the milestone for your resume of either a professional engineering license or a chartered license or a certification of some knowledge, whether it's SMRP or ASQ or others. But those all tend to have, some dates or markers that indicate you've passed a particular area, you've mastered a certain amount of information, or you've solved problems in a timely way, with some expectations of when it would be done. Those are great motivators. They also put a lot of stress on you as you go. And so there's plenty of things out there that can prod us to go learn something, right? And some of it at times it's ourselves. We say, I'm interested in this particular field, and there's a graduate program in that field. I can take it remotely and part-time and set your aim or sights on doing it. And whether your organization helps you or not may be part of that decision, but it's something that says, I want that on my resume, or I want that information, that knowledge, so I can solve problems. And there's all kinds of ways that we motivate ourselves to go do it. A big part of it is I want a new position. I want to say, I don't know, I often joke that we've lost a lot of the best engineers to management because they see that as a career path and they want to be a manager and move up the ranks on the management side. That's great. That's what they want to do. But there might be a set of prerequisites. Maybe they need to get a master's of business administration, an MBA. Well, it's one way to really destroy an engineer, in my opinion. But it is motivating to some people. Others is that I need to know more about how the organization and finances work. And I need to have a bigger picture of, say, if I'm only in operations as well, I need to learn what's going on in the design side. I need to understand the customer side of this and so on. So the education may be formal or it may be ad hoc, but it's a matter of you're interested in it. You're going to go sort it out. Years ago, when I was learning to do rock climbing, it's the prerequisite is that you needed to have some gear, like a helmet and rope and harness and stuff like that, shoes, to climb safely. And yeah, I could have gone up and climbed this 100-foot wall without all that stuff, but it's probably pretty dangerous doing that. And so having somebody to say, no, you really need this gear and then you'll be safe. That was a prerequisite to even getting on the wall. And so it's the required knowledge part of it came as I went is, well, I can climb this part, this other parts, I don't know how to do that. And then it's either coaching or it's practice and trying different things, observing other people and trying to apply that to be able to solve that problem. And some of it was knowledge and skill and confidence and those kinds of things. Yet, one of the things I've learned about over the years is that learning a hobby or a sport, for example, engages a lot of the same things that we use to solve problems, say, of a failure mechanism or a rash of field problems that are occurring or unplanned downtime that we weren't anticipating. Solving those kinds of problems are very, very similar to figuring out a new hobby, whether it's woodworking or gardening or rock climbing. It engages our senses and brains in ways that allow us to grow and to see things in different ways. And it's argued in a couple of different journals and stuff that I track on a regular basis about learning is that practice of learning is something that you get better, your brain gets better at doing. And we all have heard that our brains are plastic, that they are constantly changing. And as we learn more and new stuff and learn more often in whatever forms or sense or under whatever motivations, it becomes easier for us to learn something brand new. And so working, on a hobby in a serious way and learning as you go and getting in deep into getting better at it or just for fun actually helps you in your professional side to identify and solve problems because your brain is gearing itself up to be better at solving problems, at learning. And so it's, next time you need to justify a new tool for your workshop, it's part of your learning process. And that, I don't know how far that'll go with your folks that would buy that or not, but let me know. I'll see if I can track down those references for hobby learning at home or learning something that you're just genuinely interested in is a great way to improve your ability to learn stuff that you need to learn for work. All right. So what's your favorite way to learn? So some of you should say webinars since you're here, and some of you I recognize as being pretty regulars. It's a way to be exposed to new material and so on. But what's your favorite way to do it? And Carl, I see your question about AI is a big challenge. I don't know if it's a challenge. I think it's more of an opportunity. If you're creating AI systems, large language models, and trying to keep up with the competition, I see that as a pretty serious challenge. But how and why you use it, yeah, you can take that on as a personal challenge and learn how to do it. But if you're going to go learn about AI, how would you go about doing it? What's your favorite way to learn? And a few months ago, I ran a survey about this particular question. I had a whole pile of different everything from coaches to books to magazines to everything else, many different venues as I can think of. In the I think the best response I got was reflective of the overall results. It was pretty flat. It was pretty uniform across the board, is what people's favorite 1, 2, 3 type things were, a way to learn. And one person said, it really depends on what it is I'm trying to learn. Right? Sometimes opening up a manual is the right way to go. Sometimes, having a coach or a peer looking over your shoulder on the job training, or sometimes writing a paper on it. Sometimes it's all the different ways, webinars, so on. It varies the combination of what's a effective way to gather the information and be exposed to it, but also it's what's available is and what works for you. So it is really highly dependent of how you learn. And some of this is a nod towards will be very flexible, is there's many, many ways that you can learn something. You can increase your skill, your capability, and is to be open to all the various ways that exist. It doesn't mean that you have to go to university to get a degree. It is a way, it is a path, and it's effective for some people. It's just one of many, many ways to go out and learn something. So it's what I saw in the survey was pretty broad, and the by far the answer that summed it all up is that, well, it depends. It's what am I trying to learn, and what can I find that's available, that kind of stuff. All right, so let's talk about a few approaches that are out there. I mentioned university, stuff like that. But it's on the spot training. I'm seeing this way more often. It's the ability to Google something and say, how do I do X? Is out there. Now, some of it is just garbage, and some of it is actually pretty decent. If I need to learn about a particular analytical method, some statistical technique, I will likely go, instead of Googling for it, I'll go straight to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the NIST Engineering Statistics Handbook, which has got a pretty comprehensive listing of all these techniques and skills that are out there, say hypothesis testing for, say, paired samples. Like, I don't remember exactly how to do that. I probably have a book or two. I've probably written about it myself, but I will tend to just go to an online repository that I trust because I can find it quicker than I can find it in a book on my bookshelf, and dive into it and go, oh, okay, that's the technique, that's the formula, that's where the critical value comes from. Okay, I got it. I can go do it. Sometimes that learning is just refresher. It's something I know I need to go do. But sometimes it's, well, how do I do X? And I really don't know. Well, way back when my boss said, hey, you need to go do this accelerated test, I went to the library with just a handful of concepts of, I need to figure out how long this product will last, and I only have a couple months to do it. And the librarians were able to say, well, here's a couple of options, and they did some searches and said, here's some papers, here's some options, here's a book. And they got me close to what I was really looking for. But I learned a little bit from that first trove of papers and books, and then went back and refined my search and went on to it. But today you can do it very fast and you can get hundreds, if not thousands of responses. The other thing we did when I was at Hewlett Packard is we had an internal email list. And I highly recommend, if you're in a reliability or quality role, is to set one of these things up where it's anybody can ask a question to the group. And now instead of asking a question to just your next door neighbor and your where you work or somebody on your Slack channel, you can ask a whole crew of people from across your organization. So instead of asking one or two people, you can ask hundreds of people. And the process is that, if you got a question about how do I set up a accelerated life test for this kind of product, you'll probably get 10, 20 answers is what we used to do at Hewlett Packard. And some would be pointing to other resources. Some would say, oh, here's an approach that we've used. You might want to look at this. And sometimes they give you dead on straight, here's the answer, here's the right reference, and so on. And so it ended up being my role as the owner of that list was to make sure they got an answer and then help sort out and summarize all the answers so that they got we ended up building a pretty extensive Q&A type repository. Then we could search for that. We're just starting with creating websites back then. But the idea is that if you got a question, these days we've got so many gadgets and so many ways that we can go figure it out on the spot. What's the formula for a paired comparison hypothesis test? Well, I think I can come up with probably a dozen different ways that I could go about doing that. I'd ask a bunch of you people for that way. Yeah. Julian's bringing up, my way to learn is to get a good textbook or standard reference and download them. I like mentoring when possible. I would be more open to groups or blogs. Oops, moving up here. Hence how I got here, and welcome. Glad you found us. Otherwise, I'm actually starting to use some AI to help me in daily tasks, standard recommendations, ways to do this or that. And you like perplexity.ai. And I haven't heard of that. I'll have to give that a try. The idea is that we can be flexible about how we go about doing it, and we have lots and lots of options. There's no doubt about it. In different circumstances, situations, one or more of these various options we have available is better than another. Generally, I just go to the one that's most convenient at that moment. If I really want to dive into it, I think mentoring and getting the textbook and diving into it makes sense. But if it's just, what's that formula, or what formula should I use? Well, there's AI might be the way to get started on that, or a Google search, which apparently is becoming more and more AI generated anyway. But if you have time, and I don't think overtime where you're getting overtime pay or study is, let's say this is more akin to what most people think of as professional development. It's like, I really want to get into this. And when I first did that accelerated test, this is actually pretty useful. We need to get better at doing this in our organization. And later it became part of my consulting work. So I was constantly learning about the statistical techniques, my master's degree in statistics. While they didn't present a whole lot of anything about accelerated testing, a lot of the regression techniques and so on really do apply. And so I got, a formal education on that kind of stuff. And then I did workshops and seminars and things like that, read the textbooks inside and out. I actually had to buy another textbook over the years because I wore out the book from Wayne Nelson. But there's all kinds of options out there. And some of this is, we might have a particular focus. I really want to learn about meteorology and how different metals corrode and what we can do to protect them. I could dive pretty deep into that with a whole range of different options available and websites and books and just all kinds of stuff that's out there. And part of Ascendo is to make you aware of all this kind of stuff that's out there. The other thing is what I just learned about this a couple months ago, is this concept of a deep dive year. And I was looking for briefly when I was putting this together was, well, how do um, where did this deep dive thing come from? And I heard about it a couple months ago and I wasn't able to quickly find the origin of this. But the idea is that at some point you decide, I really want to learn this and get good at it. So I'm going to focus on this particular topic. And let's say it's accelerated testing or statistics, for example. And or it might be like I'm doing here at home in my own kitchen is I've got a really fun book on making pizzas. And I'm every week we're making pizzas and I'm taking notes and going through the book and getting better and better with each week, I think. In some toppings that are recommended are really creative. So I'm enjoying that. But instead of just making one or two recipes from that book and moving on to the next book or finding another recipe book or accelerated testing, instead of doing one test and then moving on to a dozen other topics, is way back when with accelerated testing, I choose to learn a lot more. And I learned that there's all kinds of different approaches to doing accelerated testing or life testing. In different approaches apply for different circumstances. And so I did essentially a deep dive year. I spent a year really focused on just that, going to seminars and workshops and working on the regression analysis stuff in a formal way and reading the books and journals and so on that particular topic. But it's a conscious choice to say, I'm going to focus on this for a year and get really good at it, rather than going, that looks interesting. Let me check out hypothesis testing next week. Oh, how about control charts? Let's do that the week later. And some of you in organizations probably have run into what the folks in my organization where I was working in a factory was the flavor of the month. We had all kinds of different things. Whoever was calling in all the external training apparently was reading a different book every week. And every couple of months, we'd start off, oh, we're all going to do control charts. Oh, we all got to do design of experiments. Oh, we all got to do whatever the fill in the blank newest book was. And it became overwhelming. By the time we're actually applying, say, control charts, we're back in the classroom learning something completely different. And it's kind of running out of time to actually get good at the one particular topic or a small list of topics. So a deep dive year, it might be a good way to frame your professional development plans. Is say, I want to get really good at accelerated testing, for example, or design of experiments, and then, or whatever the topic is. And then do the deliberate work to figure out, well, what's a really good way to get this? What are the right books? What podcasts? What are the right courses or seminars, workshops, conferences? And light it all up so that by the end of the year, you're really good at it. And we'll talk about the another aspect other than being the books and conferences and papers and so on. It's the practice part and feedback part. We'll talk about that in a bit here too. Let's see. Garl, I don't know anything about training industry, many training exercises and lifelong learning. I don't know. I know that there's plenty of information there about how to learn and how to stay motivated doing all that stuff. But I haven't run into this particular group, the training industry. Sounds like an interesting organization. Johan's got Copilot and or OpenAI are fine if you need to, but you need to baby them a lot of times. Yeah, I've gotten some pretty astonishingly bad responses, especially in reliability topics. Probably because I know what the answer should be, and maybe biased in that regard with AI. I don't know. I still take it with a grain of salt. And even with a textbook, I know that there are errors in textbooks. And so I'll say, all right, I'm going to use a computer program to do this hypothesis test, for example. I'll get Minitab open and run this, enter the data and see what the results are. But I'm pretty skeptical. So I will get a worked out example in a textbook and try it against the software, see if I get the same or very similar results. Then I'll work it out by hand and make sure that the textbook is right. And some of that is so that I really understand what the formula is doing, what are the assumptions underlying it, how does it all work, all that kind of stuff. But yet I've run into way too many times where it's fat fingers on a calculator and I get a number out, but it doesn't make any sense. Or I do a data analysis of a set of systems, and I highly recommend that you always plot the data. Don't believe whatever end result number you get out of it. Is you need to understand how it got there, and does it make sense? Does it, as my boss would say, does it pass the sniff test? Check it this way, that, and another, until you really understand it and knew the nuances of how did you get to that answer. That might be overkill for some problems we're solving. Yet, if it's an important decision that's got to be made, or it's a huge ramification with the results of the analysis, is do the due diligence and make sure that your software is working, or that you understand the right procedure that you should be applying, those kinds of things. But if you have time, whether it's a year or even just 3 months, there's a way to set up yourself to have your own curriculum. We have so much stuff available to us that you can find plenty of things to get up to speed on. And you'll find that after a week or two of hitting the books or the online resources, that you can really focus in on what's the right book, or what's the right podcast, or what's the right next piece of information that I need to tap into. And in that process, you may find that you find people that can be your mentor or coach and help you out with that, or find other resources or groups that are collectively trying to master a particular topic. There's lots and lots of ways that you can organize yourself and focus on a particular topic or area and really make progress on it. It takes being diligent, though, to set a plan and then go do it. So it takes a bit more motivation. Yet I find that it gets you over that novice part pretty deliberately, so that you actually can be very good at something, whether it's rock climbing or hypothesis testing, for example. Another set of motivations, and this one's more of an approach that has a deadline, is getting a degree. You get 4 years, and I don't know, I've had 3 kids go through college, and I think all of them took 5 years. I think they just like being in college. One of them's still going to school. But the idea is that there's a graduation date, right? Or we have a product launch, or we have a series of classes, and they have the course will expire, or you only have 6 months access to it, for example. Or you can set your own deadlines. It's just a matter of, I think Carl's mentioning self-discipline as a part of that. It's like, I need to read this book by the end of the month, for example, and work on the examples and apply some of the concepts and so on. Or there's a certification testing deadline. There's a window of when I can go take that test, and I need to be prepared before that. There's plenty of ways that there's a date related to what we're trying to learn. And sometimes it's like that accelerated test that I've talked about a few times already. Well, in I think it was 4 months or 6 months, the client or the customer, potential customer, wanted to make a decision to use our product or not. And one of the key pieces of information was, will it last 20 years or not? And so we needed to determine that, whether it did or not, and how well did we know it. And so there was a deadline for that test and for those results and that analysis. So just like buying things. When I read a book about persuasion, and it was really a sales and marketing type book, it's like, if it's a limited time offer, or there's a deadline will won't be available, or we're doing a cohort for this class, there's a window where you can sign up for it and then registration will close. um, there's all kinds of devices that we are exposed to, but we can also use them to our own advantage to say, I need a deadline, otherwise I'm not going to focus on it. This has to be important enough, and adding a deadline or a milestone or objective of some sort often helps us to stay motivated, to do the work, to really understand and learn something in a that may or may not be all that difficult. But if we don't actually spend the time to go do it, it's it's just that much more difficult. So there's plenty of ways we can go about motivating ourselves or get motivated. Let's see. Carl's asking, what's the role of a mentor? And well, you can answer your own question right there. I'm going to get that into that in the next section. So I'm going to come back to that, Carl. In this, I mean, it taps into a little bit of, there's a really popular, what was it? MOOC, MOOC, multiple online open course. I don't know if the M is multiple, but anyway, it was through Coursera and it was free. And I think it still is available and it's free. But I'll mention that here in a moment. But this might be a rhetorical question, but there are better ways to learn than other ways. And there is a ton of research out there about how to build courses and materials and workshops and so on to help people learn. There's also stuff about, well, how do you learn yourself, and how do you master the technique of learning? And so we'll talk about that here in a moment. The easiest, cleanest, best way I know is, and this gets to Carl's comments about mentors or coaches, is to do deliberate practice. Now, Malcolm Gladwell has been, he wrote something about 10,000 hours and you become an expert at something. You spend 10,000 hours at the piano, you'll become an expert. Well, that's rubbish. And Malcolm also says that in the full context of his book, that it's 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. And deliberate practice means that you have a coach, or you have feedback, or you have a mentor. You have somebody that's going to say, for where you are right now, take a look at this. How's that feel here? Have you considered this? And it's always right on spot and gives you feedback for where you are right now, with the intent to take you the next small step. And I ran into this when I was back training for triathlons. I really couldn't swim. I could get in a pool and splash around with the best of them. Yet, when I was in college, we had a swimming class, and the instructor there looked at my first lap of the pool and said I was in the low intermediate twitch, was the category of swimming capability I had. There was a whole lot of energy going into splashing water around and trying to breathe, and not a whole lot of forward practice or forward motion. So when I was doing triathlon, I needed to learn how to swim way more efficiently. And one of the teammates would stand on the deck and say, all right, try this. Move your head this way. Shape your hand this way. And it was one step at a time over months. Lots and lots of drinking water and lots of making very incremental small improvements. But I couldn't have done it myself because I can't see what I'm doing versus what I should be doing, because I don't know what I was supposed to be doing. I could watch the Olympic swimmers and go, I don't know what I'm looking for to know what I need to do different, other than whatever it is they did for the last 20 years to learn how to swim that well. But having that coach or that mentor or that feedback is critical, in my opinion, to learn. So you can get that feedback by working the exercises in a textbook and checking the answers, or working the examples and comparing the results you're getting to what they got. Can you do it? And check is the simplest way to do it. Is double check your answers, work it out two different ways, and you get the same answer. Um, Ask your boss, ask colleagues if you're wanting to learn how to become a better public speaker. You know, you can ask somebody you trust to say, I'm going to be doing a presentation, for the group. Could you take a look at how I'm using gestures? I'm trying to improve on that, and I want you to see, are they working? Are they effective? Or is there anything I could do better? Or how about voice modulation? Could you listen just for that? How did I do that? Or I did this one myself, as I asked somebody, says, can you count how many times I go, just that pause before I start another sentence? Because I was pretty not really conscious of how often I did that. And so I asked one of my coworkers to just take a tally, tell me how many times I did it. I was not looking forward to the response to that, because now I'm aware of how many times I'm doing it. Yet it started the practice of getting better at public speaking, because I asked different people, and every time I did a presentation, to look for one particular thing and then give me specific feedback. What worked or what didn't work? How did they notice whether it was making improvements or not, and what I could do better? Ideally, you get somebody that really knows how to swim, like I had the luck to do, and got very great feedback um, in order to make lots of improvements. Um, I'm conscious of my own ums here. The idea is to, as you learn something, whether it's, geez, now I just can't stop doing it, is as you are looking for feedback, it's, you can generate it yourself, right? It's through the textbook, through examples, through working it out a couple different ways, checking your work, all those kinds of things. Oftentimes, though, it's so much more effective to run that past somebody that knows or is good at a particular topic and ask them for feedback. And so this applies to playing the piano or doing statistics and doing data analysis. Is, am I interpreting this output correctly? This cumulative distribution function plot that I got here. Here's what I'm seeing. What do you see? Or am I interpreting this correctly? The issue is that we need to ask for it. We need to find somebody we trust their feedback, and they're willing to give us honest, sometimes brutal feedback, to say, this is what you're doing, this is what the effect is, and this is a better way to go at it, or here's ideas of doing it. Now, they may or may not be the expert in that particular topic. Yet the clearer we're at asking for feedback, is in that public speaking idea, is the better they are enabled then to give us good information. And so that's what we mean by deliberate practice. And I really, really encourage you to take a very close look at something you want to learn. Is, how are you getting feedback? And to me, the biggest trick is to ask for specific feedback. Am I using gestures effectively? Am I saying way too often, which I do. I lapse into that pretty often. The idea is to get that extra pair of eyes or ears or whatever, to focus on a particular thing, not everything. If I ask somebody to say, how was my presentation? Oh, it was fine. Well, that's not terribly useful. Well, what was really good and what wasn't so good? And give me specific examples. And it's trust on both sides, right? You need somebody that you can actually trust and that is willing to give you good feedback. The other part that's really hard is then you need to listen. You need to ask clarifying questions. You don't need to justify this. You don't need to provide excuses or anything like that. It's just listen, take notes, really understand what they're telling you, go away, think it through, process it, ask more clarifying questions if you can, and then try again. Go practice some more. The it really, really does make a difference, and it can be done with your coworkers. It can be done with your family members and so on. It's the essence is that you got to build a place that they feel comfortable giving you feedback, honest, candid feedback, and that then you actually make a difference with it, which reinforces that, hey, you really did pay attention to that. Now I'll give you more feedback if you ask it. Or can you help me? I'm going to do a presentation next month. I need to work on XYZ. Can you take a look at those? Sure. It really, really does work. Now, some people go so far as to hire a coach, a professional coach, whether it's for swimming or for public speaking or for whatever. And there's all kinds of different coaches out there. You can pay for it, or you can take that deliberate practice to heart yourself and set yourself up in a way to make that happen. The other part of this is I mentioned this Coursera course, and it's by Barbara Oakley primarily, and Terrence is in it too. And I think they have 3 or 4 different iterations of this. And I think there's a sequel or two. It's a 3-part series altogether. Yet the very first one, Learning How to Learn, is phenomenal. I think they've had millions of folks go through the course, and it's free on Coursera. It's connected to the brain science and all the work that's being done of how our brain works. And it's that deliberate practice with the bit of brain science thrown in as to how and why that works for us and it's entertaining, it's enjoyable to watch, it's pretty cool. Yet I learned a whole lot about both how to learn myself, also how to create educational pieces and so on that actually help people learn and enable them to be effective at learning something. And so I highly recommend that course. One of the bottom line parts of this, and this starts right with the motivation piece, is it takes time to learn. It takes time to go, oh, that didn't seem right. What do I need to do different? Or what is taking time to go, I don't think I need a hammer to put this screw in. I need some other tool. I need to take time to notice that, yeah, it's difficult to pound a screw into a piece of wood. You can do it. It's not enjoyable for anybody and the wood and screw involved. The hammer might enjoy it. Yet, if you only have a small toolbox, that might be your only choice. Yet, if you notice that this isn't working well, there must be a better way, you're well on the way to being able to learn, is being open to say, let me dig deeper in this toolbox and see what else is here. It's also part of this process of how our brain works is that we often, it's called laddering in the educational world, is that if I can relate learning a new concept or topic to something you're already familiar with, is that your brain then has the wiring of what you already know and understand. If I can build on that, if I can use that as a ladder to add additional knowledge and skills and so on, it becomes much easier for you to retain that knowledge, to remember it, and to learn and pick it up. If it's brand new and you're in a brand new language and a brand new culture and it's a concept or topic you've never heard of before, yet your boss says you need to learn it, that could be really, really, really difficult. So taking the steps to figure out what works for you and what analogies work for you, what is this similar to, and then thinking about that and using journaling or all kinds of other techniques to reiterate and practice. How is this similar to? How is this different from? Is a technique that gets it embedded into your long-term memory effectively. Yet it starts with that you just need to notice, how is this different? How is it similar? Why is this difficult? Is there a better way? All of those kinds of things just take a second or two. Yet in the heat of an event, or we have some lying down, or something's broken, or we have lots of field failures and the phones are ringing, it's difficult to step back, take a breath, and go, what do we know and don't know? What do we need to know? And how do I learn that stuff? How do I figure it out? What's the actual problem we're trying to solve here? And how is it similar to other circumstances? I don't know that many people that actually do that. And so it's a skill that can build on just natural curiosity and reinforce it, yet it opens a door for you to actually go learn something. So there's a bunch of different concepts in here, yet the start of it is just take a breath. What do you know and don't know? What are the questions you have? What's the observations you're making? And then move forward from that. More importantly, it's to, how is this different from or similar to something else? Let's use that laddering concept in the education theory to open yourself to learn. As opposed to, and I know all of you have run into this at one point or another, you go into a failure analysis quick meeting and somebody stands up and says, well, this is silly. I already know what the problem is and the solution. Let's go do that. And they're completely wrong. Yet jumping to a conclusion seems expedient. Sometimes that actually works, unfortunately, is taking time to say, what do we know and don't know? And what do we need to know is a learning technique. Expand that out to some other larger topic that you want to really master. It's a lot of steps of taking time to understand and cement what you're learning, and also to set yourself up, what do I need to know next? And back to coaches and mentors is a great way to reinforce that. One of the things I run into with product testing all the time is that, well, what are you expecting as a result of this test? What are the possible outcomes? And some people just look at me kind of strangely and go, what do you mean? Is we want to pass the test? Well, what if, can you detect if you're not passing the test? Because, well, we're setting the test up so we pass. Well, then why are you doing the test? It's kind of my opinion. But the idea is that if you're going to run an experiment, we often, like a hypothesis test, we have a null hypothesis. This is the status quo. If there's no actual change here, then it should be very similar to nothing's changed. This group of samples will be very similar in performance to the second group of samples. If we made a process change or design change, we would like to prove to ourselves that there is a difference. So how do you detect that? What is it we're going to measure? And what if it doesn't occur? What if simple thing like a hypothesis test, it really could be that your measurement system isn't capable of making an accurate measurement. You're using the wrong measurement system or using it incorrectly. Yet, if you don't question why it doesn't pass or fail, you just gather the data and run the calculation, you've missed an opportunity to really learn and to notice when something is odd. That's all a critical piece to what we're doing. And the final piece here, as I wrap up this one, part of it is one of the pieces of advice I got years and years ago is put your phone down. Turn the computer off, read the book, work the examples. It's really difficult to be effective at learning something by multitasking. So deliberately turn off the multitasking and take focus on it and read the book, work the examples, talk to folks, get feedback. All of those types of things takes focus. In that process, it's not a cram. We're not trying to pass the test tomorrow and then forget everything. It's take breaks, go for a walk, relax, go make dinner, do all those other things that allow us to rest our brain from what we're struggling with and then come back to it. And there's the Pomodoro technique I've heard about. It's like 40 minutes focus, 20-minute break, or some routine like that. Regulars at these webinars have heard me talk about morning pages, which is write 3 pages longhand as quick as you can every day. It can be about anything. It could be your to-do list for that day. It could be an important meeting coming up. It could be an experiment you're running and how's it going. The idea is that it declutters your thinking. It helps you focus, and it's amazing how it works. And it's through the, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the book. I should have added it in here. The bottom line for professional development, though, is create a plan. And all plans are just a plan, and they'll change. Yet, if you don't know where you're going and what you want to learn, it's really hard to get there. Now, we're going to learn something every single day in all kinds of different ways and formats and structures. We can be deliberate about what we want to learn and get really good at. And so that's where creating a professional development plan, setting out the resources and courses, webinars, topics, books, whatever, is a deliberate way to get it. And then remember to add the feedback, get feedback, get that coaching one way or the other, so that you can really cement that you're making progress in an efficient and meaningful way. Thanks, John. Appreciate that. And I think I'll end with a rhetorical question. Hopefully that applies, and it may or may not be here. And any additional comments or questions, I'll stay on the line. But thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll go out there and learn something or a couple of things. Push yourself.